Frank Dalton had built his life around certainty. He was certain of his beliefs, certain of his heritage, and certain of the people who stood by him. In the small conservative town where he lived, he was respected by those who shared his ideology and feared by those who didn't. His presence at community meetings, his speeches at rallies, and his unwavering rhetoric about the sanctity of racial purity had cemented his place as a leader among his peers. So when a local university announced a DNA testing initiative, Frank saw it as an opportunity to validate everything he had preached for years. With cameras rolling and his closest followers gathered around, he proudly submitted his DNA sample, confident that the results would confirm his so-called purity. Dr. Maria Hernandez, the geneticist overseeing the process, treated him with the same professionalism she extended to all her clients, though she couldn't ignore the irony of his participation. Frank's daughter, Sarah, who had long distanced herself from her father's ideology, watched from the sidelines, waiting for the moment he would be forced to confront reality. 2 weeks later, the envelope arrived. Frank stood before his assembled group, ready to declare his victory over the so-called lies of modern society. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. He opened the envelope with a smirk, but as his eyes scanned the document, the color drained from his face. The numbers and percentages blurred together, yet one section stood out with glaring finality: 15% sub-Saharan African ancestry. A murmur spread through the crowd. Someone let out a disbelieving chuckle. Others whispered among themselves, shifting uneasily. Frank's fingers trembled as he held the paper. "This is a mistake," he muttered. "It has to be." Dr. Hernandez stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "The results are accurate, Mr. Dalton. The science doesn't lie." His breath hitched. He looked to his followers, but their eyes no longer held admiration, only doubt. The men who had once hung on his every word now took a step back, as if his very presence tainted them. The supremacist circle, built on a rigid definition of identity, would not tolerate deviation. At home, Sarah confronted him with a quiet intensity that shook him more than the public humiliation. "You always told me who we were," she said. "But what if you never really knew?" Frank scoffed, gripping the arms of his chair as if bracing against an invisible force. "This doesn't change anything. It changes everything," she countered. "You've built your life on a lie." She laid out the evidence: old letters, documents hidden away in a dusty attic, fragments of a family history long buried. His mother, whom he had idolized for her strength, had hidden her mixed heritage out of fear, knowing the world she lived in would never accept the truth. Days passed in a haze. The news spread beyond their town, igniting national debates about race, identity, and the constructs people clung to. Frank found himself ostracized by the people he once considered his own. The supremacist circle officially cut ties with him. Anonymous threats arrived at his doorstep. He had become what he had spent his life condemning, a man without a place, an outcast. He avoided Sarah for days until, finally, he found himself at her doorstep. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, his voice small, almost unfamiliar. She studied him, searching for sincerity. "Maybe start by unlearning everything you thought you knew." It was not an easy path. The anger, the shame, the confusion, they clung to him like shadows. But slowly, he read, he listened, he questioned. For the first time in his life, he allowed doubt to seep into the cracks of his certainty. Months later, Frank stood on the outskirts of a gathering, a civil rights rally, the kind he once scoffed at. He didn't join, not yet, but he listened. And perhaps in the end, that was the first step.